From setting a stadium on fire, to invading players' houses, and attacking referees on the pitch, these are the times football fans went too extreme. And we start with the time Ronaldo met his craziest fan. During Portugal's Euro 2024 qualifying match against Bosnia and Herzegovina, a pitch invader carrying a Portuguese flag came up to Ronaldo. He gave Ronaldo a hug, and Ronaldo was a good sport and hugged him back. The fan then got down on his knees and praised him. Then the fan bear-hugged Ronaldo and lifted him into the air. He then did the "Siu" motion and the crowd joined in. Security told him to leave, but he continued running around. But when Haaland met his biggest fan, it looked like he was being attacked. Sometimes fans cannot contain their excitement. So when Erling Haaland scored this goal against Sheffield United, one fan jumped on his back. Presumably, the fan said something reassuring as Haaland hugged him before security came closing in on him. And it's just as well Haaland didn't push him away, as this random fan turned out to be world boxing champion Terry Flanagan. As our next clip will show, sometimes fans can invade the pitch without anyone noticing. In the lower leagues of England, York City were playing against Barrow. There's a scramble in the box and a York City player scored a beautiful goal. But if you look closely, the player has no number on his back. And as it turned out, this fan simply decided to sneak onto the pitch and help his team out. Fans will do absolutely anything for their team. In our next clip, fans hired an airplane to show their love. In 2023, Everton was deducted 10 points for breaking the Premier League's financial rules. However, Everton fans believe that this was deeply unfair, especially since there are multiple allegations facing Man City. So the fans flew a giant plane over the stadium with the words "Premier League equals corrupt." But like many political protests, sometimes the best way to cause a stir is to chain yourself to something, like this fan who chained himself to a goalpost. Coincidentally, this was also at Everton, who seemed to have the wildest fans. During a Man City vs Everton game, a fan invaded the pitch. However, it was a bit difficult to remove this fan from the pitch because he was handcuffed to the post. And strangely enough, his protest had nothing to do with football. His daughter at the time was fired from the airline Ryanair, and he decided to publicly shame them on live TV and in front of thousands of people. He had a shirt which read, "Europe's greatest training robbers, Ryanair, lowest wages guaranteed, stop recruitment scamming our children." And I'm not sure the airline approved of this publicity they got on live TV. As we go further down the list, we see the uglier side of fans. But before we dive into them, let's look at football fans who showed extreme positivity towards their team. In Euro 2016, Northern Ireland faced defeat in their first game against Poland. However, instead of leaving early or booing their players, the Northern Irish fans started singing about their players to hail them. And out of this came probably the most famous chants about a player in football history: "Will Griggs on fire." But while some fans hail their players, others unleash their rage against them. Real Madrid had a disappointing result against Barcelona, so some fans waited at the very spot where players drove their cars to leave the stadium. One fan stops a car driven by Jesse Rodriguez and then punches the window. He starts pointing his finger and harassing Rodriguez. Driving behind Rodriguez is captain Sergio Ramos. He rolled down his window and spoke to him. It seemed like Ramos had managed to calm them down. However, the fans were particularly annoyed when they saw Gareth Bale drive by and they tried to hit his car. This fan clearly crossed the line. But in Norway, fans were so angry that they showed a banner that we're not even able to show you on YouTube. One of the biggest rivalries in Norwegian football is between Lillestrøm and Vålerenga. In the summer of 2023, Geir Bakke was manager of Lillestrøm and he had gotten the team into a good position in the table. But in the middle of the season, something truly unbelievable happened, because this guy decided to quit his job and join Vålerenga instead. It created shockwaves for Norwegian football fans. But for the Lillestrøm fans in particular, it was an extremely disloyal act. And when the heat could not get any higher, shortly after the transfer had gone through, the two teams meet at Lillestrøm Stadium. But now it was payback time for the Lillestrøm fans. They created a banner as a welcome gift for Vålerenga's new manager. But this banner is so descriptive that YouTube doesn't allow us to show it. But we're going to try. So I'll give you 1 millisecond where I remove the censorship on this banner. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I hope you got it. But let's be honest, there is no video about extreme fans without a trip to Turkey, because they love using flares, but sometimes they go way too far when using them. During a Champions League tie between Arsenal and Galatasaray, some of the Turkish supporting fans managed to bring in some fireworks with them. Flares came from their section of the stadium, with some of them making their way onto the pitch. Galatasaray player Wesley Sneijder even had to travel over to their section to try and calm them down. The more sinister side of these fans is that they also let off flares inside pubs near the stadium which were full of Arsenal fans. These fans managed to smuggle inside these stadiums. However, there have been times when fans managed to sneak in without a ticket. In the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, many Chile fans couldn't get tickets to see their country play against Spain. The alternative option was to simply sneak into the stadium, and instead of 1 or 2 people doing this, thousands of ticketless Chile fans barged into the stadium. They decided that the press area was the easiest way in. However, this was not an orchestrated barge, but something spontaneous. The police believe that because of the different ages of everyone involved, this was not a group of hooligans, but a random group of Chilean fans suddenly deciding that not having a ticket was not going to stop them from seeing their team play. Over 80 people were arrested, and thankfully, the Brazilian military police kept everything under control. While these fans had no tickets, imagine a scenario where fans purchased tickets and traveled thousands of miles only to be told that they weren't coming in. Next up, we have the chaos of the 2022 Champions League final. In 2022, Liverpool were once again in the Champions League final against Real Madrid, who had beaten them in 2018. However, fans weren't allowed into the stadium and the game was delayed, as the stadium allowed fans in through a bottleneck approach. You would think that Paris, of all places, would be more than capable of hosting a major sporting event like this. This agitated the fans and they started getting reckless. Some footage showed fans trying to climb over the fence. It's believed that police also used tear gas on fans too. It was alleged that there were fans without tickets or with fake tickets, but this turned out to be false. In fact, the chaos is mainly blamed on the French authorities rather than any of the football fans. As we'll see in our next footage, the chaos can sometimes make its way outside the stadium. In 2010, a police station in Manchester received an urgent call. On the phone was Wayne Rooney, who dialed 999 when he saw fans waiting outside his house. Around this time, Rooney had threatened to move to Manchester City, which angered United fans to the extent that they were willing to protest outside his home. A man rang the buzzer and said, "We want to talk to you, Wayne. We want you to explain the real reason you want to leave. We're not going to hurt you." However, there was another banner that said, "Join City and die." So the fans sent fairly mixed messages, and a similar type of anger has more recently been seen on the streets of Brazil. Santos in Brazil is the team of Pele, Robinho and Neymar, so their recent relegation was humiliating to their fans. This was the first time in their 111-year history of getting relegated, and they did not take it well. Fans stormed the pitch, and thankfully the players were evacuated before anything serious happened. But it didn't stop inside the stadium. Fans set fire to cars and buses outside the stadium. Many people have compared it to scenes from GTA, except taking place in real life on the streets of Brazil. As we move further down the list, we have our first piece of footage where fans have managed to physically hurt a player. In a game between Lyon and Marseille, Dimitri Payet was innocently taking a corner when a full bottle was thrown at him in the stands, striking him and knocking him to the ground. The players left the field for an hour until things settled. However, when the Lyon players lined up to continue the game, they realized that their opponents were not coming to the pitch. They quite understandably refused to play. This was not an isolated event either. When PSG were playing, guards shielded Neymar from oncoming bottles when taking a corner. These incidents now mean that some football stadiums will take the cap off when you buy a drink, so it is much too difficult to throw it at a player. But this attack came from the stands. Our next clip shows a fan with the same fire and fury, except this time he's on the pitch. And blood was spilled. In Australia, fans of Melbourne Victory staged a protest at the 20-minute mark of a game to protest Football Federation Australia's decision to host the next 3 grand finals at Sydney's Allianz Stadium. Flares were thrown across the crowd and onto the pitch. The referee stopped the game until tensions had blown over, but things were only getting started. Fans ran onto the pitch and the ref was attacked. He was hit with a bucket used to store flares and was covered in white dust. The cameras then zoomed out as goalkeeper Tom Glover was attacked and was bleeding after being struck with a metal bucket. Thankfully, Glover was not too seriously injured. Our next player was not so lucky. In the Romanian league, a football fan was not happy with one of the penalty decisions and decided to attack one of the players. players. The fan runs behind one of the players and punches him right in the head, causing the player to fall to the ground. Once he was spotted doing this, another player intervened and wrestled him to the ground. He then kicked him for good measure too. Security finally captured the fan and he was removed. However, the player who kicked him was sent off, and sadly, the player who was punched suffered a fractured cheekbone. As we get to number 4, we have one of the most deadly football games in recent history. Arguably the most intense game in the world is when the football-mad countries Argentina and Brazil clash. By 2023, Argentina had won the World Cup in 2022, and in this game they beat Brazil in their home stadium. Fights broke out between two sets of fans and the police intervened. However, the police were particularly heavy-handed when it came to dealing with the Argentinian fans. Lionel Messi even came over pleading for calm, and there were some pretty unsettling images of the people who got caught in the crossfire, as many women and children were terrified by what was happening. Argentina's keeper, Emi Martinez, climbed onto the stand and pulled the arm of a police officer to prevent him from hitting an Argentinian fan. Messi spoke about the chaos and said, "You think about the family, the people who were there, who don't know what's going on, and we were more concerned about that than playing a match." At that point, the match was secondary. And I'm sure the same sentiment was felt when all hell broke loose in Saint-Étienne, France. Relegation can be the worst thing to happen to a football team. And just like what happened in Santos, these fans in Saint-Étienne had their blood boiling with rage. Once the final whistle blew, the fans swarmed the pitch, with many players racing through the tunnel. Some fans carried flares and even threw a flare in the tunnel towards the players. The continued use of flares meant that the pitch was gathering a cloud of smoke too. It was a dark day for French football, as 14 police officers, 17 fans, and 2 Auxerre players were injured. I wish this was the worst example of fans taking things too far, but Serbia was a city also devastated by football hooliganism. Serbia is known for its passionate football fans, and the Belgrade derby between Partizan Belgrade and Red Star is where tensions are high. During a 2013 game, fans set fire to a bunch of empty seats, forcing a firefighter to approach the stand and put it out with a hose. But it was during a 2017 game that things were particularly violent. Disturbing footage shows fans fighting with each other, and many people were covered in blood. Bizarrely enough, some sources say that some of the fighting was between different sections of Partizan fans. Another source said that people were invited from Croatia to take part in the massive brawl. 17 people were injured, and sadly, one of them had a severe head injury. It was a bleak reminder that there are sometimes things more important than football. And nothing echoes that sentiment more than what we have at number 1. At the start of the game, Bradford City fans were in good spirits, as they had just won the 3rd Division Championship trophy. During the match, a commentator noticed that a small fire was taking place in the stands. Within a matter of minutes, this entire stand was ablaze. Sometimes, tragic events in stadiums are not the fans' fault, but have to do with the design of the stadium. The fire was mainly caused by the fact that the stand was made of wood and litter had accumulated around the stadium. A forensic expert guessed that someone might have dropped a cigarette among the litter, and this was enough to cause an entire fire. Sadly, 265 people were injured and a staggering total of 56 people died. This tragedy has been a lesson learned for football stadiums all over the world, and of course, it was yet again another reminder that there are some things more important than football. Thanks for watching.